Detective Orlando Kitts flicked a cigarette butt out of the window of his old Chevrolet and sighed wearily. Monday morning had begun with a call to an affluent neighborhood in Port Huron, Michigan, which was unusual in itself. In his 23 years on the force, he had grown accustomed to very different calls: drunken fights, domestic violence, petty thefts from supermarkets. Affluent neighborhoods rarely troubled the police station. Kitts squinted as he looked up at the imposing red brick mansion with white columns. Bernice Higgins's house stood out even among the other luxurious mansions on Lakeview Avenue. 3 stories, a well-kept garden, and a black Cadillac in the driveway. Everything spoke of the owner's wealth. "Detective Kitts?" A short, plump woman in a housekeeper's uniform greeted him at the door. "Miss Higgins is waiting for you in the living room." Kitts nodded and went inside, mentally preparing himself for another story about missing jewelry or anonymous phone calls. It was a standard complaint from wealthy, lonely ladies who were mostly just looking for attention. The living room was impressive in size and decor: a crystal chandelier, antique furniture, paintings in heavy frames. Kitts involuntarily ran his hand over his worn jacket, feeling out of place in such surroundings. "Detective, thank you for coming so quickly." Bernice Higgins sat in an armchair by the fireplace, like a queen on a throne. Her dark skin contrasted with her snow-white pantsuit, and a massive pearl necklace sparkled around her neck. "What's troubling you, Miss Higgins?" Kitts took out his notebook and sat down on the edge of the sofa. "This is what's troubling me," she said, handing him an envelope. "I've been receiving these for 3 months. At first I thought they were harmless, but now I'm not so sure." Kitts took the envelope. High-quality paper with watermarks, neat handwriting, no stamps, meaning it had been delivered some other way. "Was this letter addressed to you?" he asked, looking at the return address. "Jackson State Prison, Michigan." "Yes, from Decker Lyon. He's an inmate." Kitts raised his eyebrows. "Do you know this man? A relative?" Bernice looked away. "No, we met through a prison pen pal program. I do charity work and thought it was a worthy cause to support those behind bars." Kitts tapped his pen thoughtfully on his notepad. A strange hobby for a wealthy widow, but not a crime. "What exactly concerns you about these letters?" "At first, nothing. They were pleasant. Decker is educated, well-read. He writes poetry." Bernice blushed slightly. "But the last few letters, they hinted that he knew more about me than he should. About my house, my daily routine. I never wrote to him about that." Kitts glanced at the last letter. Indeed, between the lines of romantic poetry were details that the prisoner could not have known. "I can imagine you drinking your morning coffee on the terrace, looking at the rose garden. You always come to your salon on Main Street on Tuesdays wearing a blue dress. Do you still have all the letters?" "Yes, I put them in a box. There are a lot of them." Bernice got up and went to the secretary, took out a carved wooden box and handed it to Kitts. Inside were at least 50 letters, neatly folded and tied with a silk ribbon. "Can I take them to study?" "Of course. I want to understand what's going on. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but—" "Better to be safe than sorry," Kitts finished for her. "Tell me, Miss Higgins, have you noticed anything unusual lately? Strangers near the house? Strange phone calls?" Bernice shook her head. "No. Although, a couple of weeks ago, I noticed a car parked across the street. No one usually parks there. A dark Honda. I saw it several days in a row." "Did you get the license plate number?" "Unfortunately, no. It was gone before I thought to check." Kitts jotted it down in his notebook. "I'll check out your correspondent. He may be connected to someone on the outside. When did you start this correspondence?" "About 6 months ago. At first, the letters were infrequent. Then they started coming every week. In the last month, almost every day." "Do you answer them?" "Yes, at first out of politeness, then—" She lowered her eyes in embarrassment. "I was flattered by the attention of such an eloquent man. I've been a widow for 7 years, detective. Life gets lonely." Kitts nodded understandingly. The story was as old as the hills. A lonely woman, a young, charismatic man who knew how to get what he wanted. A classic scam. The only question was what exactly Decker Lyon was planning. "I'll take a look around the house if you don't mind," Kitts said, getting up. "And I'd like to talk to your servants. They may have noticed something you didn't. Of course, Martha and Joseph have been with us for 15 years. They know the house better than I do. Kit spent the next 2 hours walking around the property and talking to the staff. Martha, the housekeeper, confirmed the story about the suspicious car, and Joseph, the gardener, mentioned that he had found cigarette butts on the lawn twice. A strange fact, considering that no one in the house smoked. "Martha," Kit said to the housekeeper when they were alone in the kitchen, "have you noticed any changes in Miss Higgins's behavior lately?" Martha looked around, as if checking to see if their employer could hear them. "She's changed," the woman said quietly. "Miss Bernice used to be so collected, always busy, always making plans, meetings, events. Now she sits around for hours waiting for the mailman. She's buying new dresses and perfume. She's like a teenage girl, honestly. Did she mention this to you, Dexter?" No, but I've seen the letters, and I've heard her dictating replies to her secretary. She says such things." Martha shook her head. "It's none of my business, of course, but it's disturbing. I'm 62, Detective. I've seen a thing or two in my time." When a woman of Miss Bernice's age is so infatuated with a convict who could be her son, it never ends well. Kit nodded in agreement, making notes in his notebook. "What can you tell me about her circle? Family? Friends?" "She has almost no family. Her husband died and she never had children. Only her niece Tallulah, her sister's daughter. She comes by sometimes. She works in one of Miss Bernice's salons. And then there's Mr. Hugo, a business partner who stops by." "Anything suspicious about their behavior?" "Everything about Mr. Hugo is suspicious," Martha smiled. "He's a slippery character, always smiling but with cold eyes. But Miss Bernice trusts him. They open the salons together." After finishing his inspection, Kit returned to Bernice. "I contacted the police," he said. "We'll check out your Decker lion. In the meantime, I would recommend that you stop corresponding with him." "Do you think it's dangerous?" Something like disappointment flashed in Bernice's eyes. "I don't know yet, but it's better to be safe than sorry. You're a wealthy woman, Miss Higgins. People like you are often targeted by all kinds of con artists." "Deckers isn't like that," Bernice said unexpectedly firmly. "He made a mistake, but he's changing. In his letters, he talks about remorse, about plans for the future." "Which I'm sure include you and your money," Kit remarked gently. Bernice pursed her lips. "You're cynical, Detective. It's my job, ma'am. I'm paid for cynicism." Taking the box of letters, Kit headed for the station. There, he first requested the file on Decker Lyon. The response came an hour later. Armed robbery, resisting arrest, 5 years in prison. He had already served 3. The prison authorities' report was positive. Exemplary behavior, participation in educational programs, no disciplinary violations. Kit began to study the letters carefully, arranging them by date. The first ones were formal. Thanks for participating in the prisoner support program, stories about the prison library, books that Decker had read. Gradually, the tone changed. Compliments appeared, poetic digressions, hints of sympathy. By the 3rd month of correspondence, the letters became openly romantic. And in the last 2 weeks, those very disturbing details appeared. Mentions of Bernice's home environment, her habits, and her daily routine. Too specific to be accidental. "Hey, Kits," Sergeant Graham peeked into the office. "Some lady is asking for you. She says it's about the Higgins case." A young woman was waiting for him in the reception area. Tall, slender, with tight braids pulled back into a high ponytail. Her strict business suit and minimal makeup contrasted with her bright gold hoop earrings. "Detective Kits? I'm Tallulah Lilibay, Bernice Higgins' niece. Martha said you were coming today." "Yes, Miss Lilibay. How can I help you?" "Actually, I want to help. I'm worried about my aunt, her correspondence. It's not normal." Kits invited her into his office and offered her coffee, which Tallulah declined. "Aunt Bernice has never been frivolous," she began, tapping her fingers nervously on the armrest. "Since Uncle Ronald died, she's devoted herself entirely to the business. Beauty salons, charity work, community service. And then these letters. She never mentioned them, but I saw her reading them, with such an expression on her face." Tallulah paused, like a girl in love. "When did you notice the change in her behavior?" "About 3 months ago. She started dropping by the salon where I work as an administrator more often. She became interested in new treatments and cosmetics. She changed her hairstyle and started dressing more brightly. At first I was happy. I thought she was finally getting over her uncle's death. And then I saw the letters and the return address. Did you try to talk to her about it? I tried. She said it was just charity work, that she had no personal relationship with this Decker. But I can see how she's changing. My aunt was always so together. And now? Tallulah shook her head. You know, last week she missed a college board meeting. She's never done that before. Are you afraid that Decker Lion might harm your aunt in some way? Tallulah leaned forward. I'm afraid he already is. Psychologically. She lives for those letters, Detective. She waits for them, rereads them. I suspect she even sends him money to his prison account. It's like an obsession. How old are you, Miss Lilibay? 32. Why? And you've never seen your aunt get involved with anyone since her husband died? Never. After Uncle Ronald died, she said her heart died with him. And now? Tallulah clenched her fists. This is some kind of manipulation. She's too smart for that kind of nonsense. Kitts tapped his pen thoughtfully on the table. I'll check out this Decker more thoroughly. He may have accomplices on the outside, someone who's watching your aunt and passing information. Thank you, Detective. Tallulah stood up. I'll leave you my number. Call me any time if there's any news. I'm really worried about my aunt. After Tallulah left, Kitts looked through the letters again. Something bothered him, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Perhaps it wasn't just romantic feelings. What if Decker Lion really did know Bernice Higgins before, or had some kind of score to settle with her? The next day, Kittis went to the chic beauty salon owned by Bernice Higgins. The luxurious establishment in the city center served the wealthiest women in Port Huron. Tallulah met him at the entrance. Detective, my aunt won't be coming today. She has a migraine. Actually, I wanted to talk to the staff. I'm trying to get a more complete picture. Tallulah led him inside. The salon was decorated in black and white with gold accents. Stylists and beauticians, mostly young black women and men, were working with clients. Kiara, Tallulah called to one of the employees. This is Detective Kitts. He wants to talk about Miss Higgins, about her behavior lately. Kiara, a thin woman with purple hair, put down her comb. It's that noticeable, is it? She asked with a smile. Miss B seems to have gotten 20 years younger. She's singing all the time, giving compliments. Last week, she even announced an unexpected day off for the whole salon, with full pay. Do you know the reason for the change? Not officially, but there are rumors. Kiara lowered her voice. They say she's having an affair. Someone saw letters from a man. Did she tell you who the man is? No, but I've been working here for 6 years, and I've never seen her so lively. Not even when Mr. Higgins was alive. Kitts walked around the salon talking to the other employees. Everyone noted the strange changes in Bernice's behavior. She had become distracted, often smiled to herself, and would suddenly leave in the middle of the workday. By the way, Kiara said finally, Miss B recently asked me to recommend a good stylist for men. She's never been interested in that before. As he left the salon, Kitts was stopped by a phone call. The number was unfamiliar. Detective Kitts, he answered. Detective, this is Bernice Higgins. I need to talk to you urgently. I think you were right. I found another letter. It's frightening. 20 minutes later, Kitts was at Bernice's house. She met him in the living room, pale and distraught. It was in the mailbox this morning, no stamp. Someone brought it and put it there. Kitts took the envelope she handed him. Same watermarked paper, same handwriting. But the contents were no longer romantic. Dear Bernice, you thought you could just brush off the past? You thought I wouldn't find out the truth? I know everything. About you, about the money, about what happened 12 years ago. You can't hide behind your salons and charity forever. I'll be out of here in 2 years, and then we'll talk in person. What is he writing about? Kitts asked, looking at Bernice. What happened 12 years ago? Bernice sank into a chair. I don't know, I really don't. 12 years ago was a normal year. Ronald and I opened our second salon. I was doing charity work. Nothing special happened. Is this the first letter like this? Yes, all the previous ones were different, romantic, full of hope for the future. Decker wrote about how he had changed, how he had reevaluated his life, and now this? She shook her head. I don't understand. Kitts studied the letter thoughtfully. Miss Higgins, I think there's more to this than just a romantic correspondence with a prisoner. Perhaps this Decker Lion is somehow connected to your past. Are you sure you've never heard that name before? Absolutely. I would have remembered. It's such an unusual name. Well, then there's only one way to find out, Kit said, slipping the letter into his pocket. I need to talk to Decker Lion in person. I'm going to Jackson Prison tomorrow. Bernice shuddered. Do you think I'm in danger? It's hard to say at this point, but I would advise you to be careful. Don't open the door to anyone, and stop this correspondence. As Kitts left, he couldn't shake the feeling that Bernice Higgins was hiding something. Something had happened 12 years ago, and whatever it was, Decker Lion had somehow found out about it. And now he was using that information to his advantage. In the car, Kitts reread the mysterious letter. Was it just a romantic affair? Or was there something more sinister behind it? What connected a wealthy 60-year-old widow and a 30-year-old criminal? And why was Decker so sure he could threaten her with something from her past? Kitties slammed his notebook shut and started the car. Tomorrow he would go to Jackson Prison and look Decker Lion in the eye. Maybe then he would get the answers he was looking for. The morning was damp and gray. Detective Orlando Kitts tossed and turned in bed, glancing at the clock. It was exactly 5 in the morning. Sleep would not come, thoughts of the strange case of Bernice Higgins keeping him awake. Something was wrong here, and Kitts could feel it with his professional instincts. At 6 o'clock sharp, he was already sitting at his computer at the police station, leafing through old newspaper articles about the Higgins family. At first glance, it was a typical story, a success story of 2 ambitious spouses who had managed to turn a modest hair salon into a chain of thriving beauty salons. Ronald and Bernice Higgins, a model couple, active in the local community and generous to charity. Kitts began digging deeper, looking for information about the couple's personal life, and that's when the first oddities began to appear. Early articles mentioned their son, Marcus Higgins. Then the mention stopped abruptly. No obituaries, no official reports of his death. It was as if the man had ceased to exist. Hey, Kitts, Sergeant Graham peeked into the office. What are you digging up so early? The Higgins case. Do you remember anything about their son, Marcus Higgins? Graham rubbed his chin, trying to remember. There was something 10 or 12 years ago. A young guy died under strange circumstances. It looked like a car accident, but there were rumors that it wasn't that simple. His father seems to have used his connections to cover it up. The archive smelled of dust and old paper. Kit spent 2 hours before finding what he was looking for, a thin file on a car accident that had happened exactly 12 years ago. Marcus Higgins, 22 years old, the only son of Ronald and Bernice Higgins, had died after losing control of his car on a slippery road. The envelope inside the file contained Marcus's personal belongings, which had been taken from the car, his wallet, keys, a gold chain, and to Kitts's surprise, a prison photo. On the back was written, "Your friend Decker will always be with you." Kitts held the photo closer to the light. It wasn't the Decker Lion Bernice had been corresponding with. He was too young, with different facial features. But the name matched. Kitts photographed all the documents and hurried to Jackson Prison. It was time to meet the mysterious Decker Lion in person. The prison greeted him with gray walls and the smell of disinfectant. After the standard search procedure, Kitts was taken to the visiting room. Decker Lion was not what he had expected. He was a tall, well-built man with intelligent eyes and a calm smile. The prison uniform looked almost elegant on him. "Detective Kitts." Decker extended his hand for a handshake. "To be honest, I've been waiting for your visit." Kitts shook his hand and sat down opposite him. "Really? And why is that?" "Bernice must have received my last letter." "Yes, she did. And it worried her considerably. What did you mean when you mentioned events from 12 years ago?" Decker leaned back in his chair, studying Kitts. "You already know, don't you? Otherwise you wouldn't be asking. You dug up Marcus's history." "I know that Bernice's son died in a car accident 12 years ago. What does that have to do with you?" Decker smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "Marcus was my best friend. We grew up together, went to college together, and then he was gone. The official story is that it was an accident, but I always knew that wasn't true." "Why are you so sure?" "Because Marcus called me the day before. He was excited, said he'd discovered something important, Something about his parents, about how they made their fortune. He said he had to meet me and tell me everything, but he never showed up. Kitts watched Decker closely. He spoke convincingly, but something in his tone made him wary. And you decided to get revenge by starting a romantic correspondence with his mother? 12 years later? I wasn't out for revenge, Detective. I wanted to know the truth. When I saw Bernice Higgins' name on the list of volunteers for the prison pen pal program, I thought it was a sign. A chance to finally understand what happened to Marcus. After visiting the prison, Kitts felt even more confused. The story Decker told him sounded plausible, but something told him it was only the tip of the iceberg. His next stop was the local newspaper archive. Kitts spent several hours there, poring over files from 12 years ago, and he found what he was looking for. A short article about the tragic death of a young man from a prominent family. A photograph of Marcus Higgins, a smiling young man with an open gaze, accompanied the article. But what really caught Kitts's attention was the funeral photo, which showed a young man standing in the mourning crowd behind a sobbing Bernice, looking strikingly similar to Decker Lyon. Kitts made a copy of the photo and headed to Bernice Higgins' house. He had to find out more about this story. Martha greeted him with a worried look on her face. Miss Bernice isn't feeling well, Detective. She's taking her medication and sleeping. Maybe you should come back later? This is urgent, Martha. I need to show her something. The housekeeper hesitated, but then nodded. All right, I'll show you into the living room and see if she can get up. Kitts waited in the living room for almost half an hour. Finally, Bernice appeared, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, but still dignified. Detective Kitts, Martha said it was important. Yes, Miss Higgins, I was at the prison talking to Decker Lyon. Bernice froze. And what did he say? A lot. In particular, that he was your son Marcus's best friend. Bernice's hand trembled, and she sank into the chair. Marcus had many friends. I don't remember all their names. But you must remember Decker. He was at the funeral. Kitts handed her a copy of the newspaper photo. It's him, isn't it? Bernice stared at the photo for a long time, her fingers trembling slightly. Maybe. I don't remember that day clearly. It was a difficult time. Miss Higgins, I think you knew who Decker Lyon was when you started corresponding with him. It wasn't an accident. Bernice looked up at him wearily. What do you want me to say, Detective? That I was looking for redemption? That I was trying to atone for some kind of guilt? My son died 12 years ago. It was a terrible tragedy that tore our family apart. Decker claims that Marcus's death was not an accident. That's ridiculous! Bernice raised her voice. Marcus was drunk behind the wheel. He was always impulsive, reckless. Ronald and I tried to guide him, to help him, but... Her voice faltered. He chose his own path. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Martha hurried to answer it. Miss Bernice, Mr. Hugo is here, she announced, returning to the living room accompanied by a tall, gray-haired man. Everett, what are you doing here? Bernice was clearly surprised. I came to see how you were doing, dear. You missed today's board meeting. That's not like you. Everett Hugo paused when he noticed Kitts. And who's this? Detective Orlando Kitts, he introduced himself, extending his hand. I'm helping Miss Higgins with a delicate matter. Hugo shook his hand firmly, confidently, as if testing his strength. A delicate matter? Bernice, are you in trouble? Nothing serious, Everett, just a minor misunderstanding. Einer. Kitts watched their interaction closely. Bernice visibly tensed at Hugo's appearance, and despite his outward concern, he looked at her appraisingly, as if calculating something in his mind. Mr. Hugo, have you known Miss Higgins for long? Kitts asked. Oh, 25 years. We started the business together. Bernice, Ronald, and I, may he rest in peace. So you knew their son, Marcus, well? Hugo tensed slightly. Of course, he was a wonderful boy. His death was a terrible tragedy for all of us. Everett, Bernice interrupted, could you wait for me in the conservatory? I need to finish talking to the detective, and then I'll join you. Hugo glanced suspiciously at both of them, but nodded. Of course, dear. Detective. He nodded slightly to Kitts and left. The next day, Kitts decided to visit the second Decker. According to the database, Decker Williams was serving time in the same Jackson prison for drug distribution. But when Kitts arrived there, he was disappointed. Williams had been released 2 months earlier after serving his full sentence. The address Williams had left upon his release led Kitts to a rundown motel on the outskirts of Port Huron. The motel owner, a haggard man with shifty eyes, confirmed that Williams had lived there for about a month, but had moved out a week ago without leaving a new address. "What about his things? Did he take everything?" Kitts asked. "Yes, except for a box. He said he'd come back for it, but he never did. I was just about to throw it out." Kitts showed his badge. "I'll take that box. It's evidence in an investigation." The box contained old magazines, several books, and a photo album. Kitts opened it and froze. On the first page was a photo of a young Ducker Williams with Marcus Higgins. They were standing arm in arm, smiling at the camera. The college campus was visible in the background. There were other photos. Marcus and Decker at parties, on the beach, in some bar. And then there was a photo that took Kitts's breath away. Marcus, Decker Williams, and Decker Lyon, all three together, holding glasses, clearly celebrating something. They knew each other. Both Deckers were acquainted with Marcus. Why hadn't Lyon mentioned this? At the end of the album, Kitts found an envelope with a newspaper clipping about Marcus's death and a handwritten note. "They killed him, and they'll pay for it. D." That evening, Kitts returned to his small apartment. His head was filled with conflicting thoughts. He spread all the materials he had collected, copies of letters, photographs, notes from his notebook, across the table and tried to see the big picture. Something had happened 12 years ago that had led to the death of Marcus Higgins. Decker Lyon was certain his friend had been murdered. Bernice Higgins insisted it was an accident. The Higgins family had used their influence to quickly close the case. And what about the other Decker, Williams? What role had he played in this whole story? Kitts was so deep in thought that he didn't hear the phone ring. "Detective Kitts," he answered, pressing the receiver to his ear. "Detective, this is Tallulah Lilibay, Bernice Higgins's niece. I'm calling to see if there's any news. My aunt has been very upset the last few days." "Miss Lilibay, I'm working on the case. Did you know Marcus Higgins?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Of course. He was my cousin. We grew up together." "And you knew about his relationship with Decker Lyon?" "I don't understand what you're talking about." Tallulah's voice tightened. "Marcus dated girls. He had a fiancée, Alicia." This new twist puzzled Kitts. Bernice claimed that her son was in a relationship with Decker. The next morning, Kitts returned to the Higgins mansion. He had new questions and couldn't wait. However, when he arrived, he was greeted by a distraught Martha. "Detective, I'm so glad you're here. Miss Bernice hasn't answered her phone since this morning. I checked her bedroom, it's empty. Her car is here, and the driver says he hasn't taken her anywhere." "Did you check the whole house?" "Everywhere except the greenhouse. She always locks it, and I don't have a spare key." A sense of foreboding came over Kitts. He hurried across the garden to the glass conservatory adjoining the rear of the house. The doors were locked, but through the glass he could see lush tropical plants inside. And something else, a dark figure lying on the marble floor among the ferns. "Call the police and an ambulance!" he shouted to Martha, pulling out his gun. "Stay here!" With one blow of the pistol butt, Kitts smashed the glass panel in the door and reached in to unlock it from the inside. The humid tropical air hit his face as he rushed inside. Bernice Higgins lay on her back amid the shards of broken clay pots. Her white pantsuit was stained with dirt, and a dark red stain was spreading across her chest. Her eyes were wide open, but they saw nothing. Kitts knelt down beside her and checked her pulse, though he already knew he wouldn't find one. Bernice Higgins was dead. Port Huron had never seen so many police cars near a single house. Red and blue lights flashed across the front of the Higgins mansion. Yellow tape cordoned off the perimeter, and journalists circled like vultures, searching for sensational details. Detective Orlando Kitts stood in the conservatory, watching the medical examiners work on Bernice Higgins's body. The shock of discovering the body gave way to cold determination. In his 23 years on the force, he had seen many murders, but this one was special. He knew the victim. He had spoken to her just the day before. Death occurred between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., the medical examiner reported, pulling off his latex gloves. One stab wound to the heart. Professional, I'd say. No other wounds, no signs of a struggle. Martha sat in the kitchen, her head in her hands. Next to her was a young officer taking her statement. "Martha," Kit said gently, sitting down opposite her. "I need your help. Who was the last person to see Miss Higgins last night?" The housekeeper looked up, her face tear-stained. "I think it was me. I brought her tea around 10. She was in the library reading. She said she was going to bed early. Who else was in the house yesterday?" "Just me, Joseph, the gardener, and Mr. Hugo. He came after dinner, and he and Miss Bernice talked for a long time. They seemed to be arguing about something. And Miss Tallulah? Did she come by yesterday?" Martha frowned. "No, but she called. I heard Miss Bernice talking to her on the phone before dinner. They seemed to be arguing too." At the police station, Tallulah looked pale but composed. Her black dress accentuated her slender figure. Her hair was pulled back in a strict bun. There was no sign of tears or grief, only tension in her eyes. "Miss Lillibay," Kitts began, sitting down across from her in the interrogation room. "Please tell me where you were last night between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. "I already told your colleague. I was at home. I watched a TV series and went to bed around midnight." Kitts placed a printout from the surveillance camera in front of her. "Is this your car, Miss Lillibay, in the driveway of your aunt's house at 12:30 a.m.? Tallulah stared at the photo without blinking. "I don't know what car that is. You have a dark blue Chevrolet Impala, license plate JKL 234. That's the car in the photo." Tallulah remained silent, staring at the table. "Miss Lillibay, your aunt was killed between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. That's exactly when your car was in her driveway." "I want a lawyer," Tallulah said quietly, looking up at Kitts. While Tallulah was talking to her lawyer, Kitts received the results of the search of her apartment. No traces of blood, no murder weapon, but they did find old photos of the Higgins family and a diary that Tallulah had kept since she was a teenager. "Boss," the young officer said to him, "you should take a look at this." He handed Kitts the open diary with a bookmark. "Talked to Decker today," Kitts read. "He said the documents confirm my suspicions. I'm not Bernice's niece, I'm her daughter. She gave birth to me in secret and gave me to her sister. All these years of lies and rejection, she'll pay for this." The entry was dated a week ago. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Jackson Prison. Decker Lyon was requesting an urgent meeting with the detective. 2 hours later, Kitts was sitting across from the prisoner in the prison visiting room. "I heard about Bernice's death," Decker began without preamble. "It was on the news." "And what do you think about that, Mr. Lyon?" "I think we've come full circle. 12 years ago, Marcus died. Now his mother is dead." "Did you know that Tallulah Lillibay was Bernice's daughter, not her niece?" Decker raised his eyebrows. "Did you dig up that story?" "Impressive. Yes, I knew. Marcus told me before he died. He found some old papers in his father's study, a birth certificate, adoption papers. Bernice had Tallulah out of wedlock before she was married. She gave the child to her sister and married a wealthy man named Ronald Higgins. She built a perfect life, hiding her mistake of youth. And you told Tallulah about this?" "No, but Decker Williams might have. He knew too." "Marcus found old bills, contacts," Decker continued. "He was an idealist, wanted to tell the police everything, but he didn't have time. The accident happened too soon." "Do you think Ronald killed his own son?" "No. Ronald was a weakling. Everett Hugo did it. He was always the real power in their partnership. He solved problems, and Marcus became a problem." Kitts shook his head. "If you knew all this, why did you keep quiet for 12 years? "Because I had no proof. Just Marcus's word. I tried to investigate, but I was quickly put behind bars for armed robbery. Convenient, isn't it?" After prison, Kitts went looking for Decker Williams. He got lucky. A bartender at a club on the outskirts of town recognized his photo. "Yeah, he was here a couple of days ago. He was drinking whiskey and talking about old debts." Decker Williams was not at the Quiet Harbor Motel. The manager said that the guest had checked out early in the morning, leaving his key and paying the bill in cash. Tallulah returned for a second interview with a lawyer, a short man with a shrewd gaze. "My client will only answer specific questions regarding her whereabouts on the night of the murder," he said as soon as they sat down. "Fine," Kitts nodded. "Miss Lillibay, we found your diary. There is an entry stating that you learned the truth about your origins, that Bernice Higgins is your biological mother, not your aunt. Tallulah flinched but maintained her composure. I don't understand how that's relevant. It's direct. It's emotive. You were upset that you'd been lied to your whole life. That doesn't make me a murderer. No, but your car was at Bernice's house on the night of the murder. That's serious evidence. Tallulah glanced at her lawyer. Okay, she said slowly. I did go to my aunt's, to Bernice's that night. I wanted to talk to her, to ask her if what I'd found out was true. Who told you? Ducker Williams. He found me a couple of weeks ago and showed me some papers. My birth certificate, adoption papers. And what did Bernice say when you asked her? Tallulah lowered her eyes. She denied it. She said Decker was lying, that the papers were fake, that she loved me like a niece and would never hurt me with a lie like that. Did you believe her? No, I saw the fear in her eyes. She was afraid the truth would come out, that everyone would find out about her mistake. And that's why you killed her? No! Tallulah raised her voice. I didn't kill her. Yes, I was angry. Yes, I felt betrayed, but I would never… Her voice faltered. When I left, she was alive, I swear. After the interrogation, Kitts received an urgent message. Decker Williams had been found dead in his car, in the parking lot of the Blue Moon Motel. He had been shot in the head. A folder with documents was found in the glove compartment of the car. Tallulah's birth certificate, old photographs, and some financial statements. Kitts called Tallulah, but she didn't answer. He sent a patrol car to her house, but no one was there. The alarm grew. Kitts checked the city's CCTV footage and discovered that Everett Hugo's car had been seen near Bernice's house on the night of the murder. In addition, phone records showed that Hugo had called an unregistered number, the same number from which Decker Williams had called Tallulah a week earlier. Kitts rushed to Hugo's mansion. The house was empty. No owner, no servants. But in the study on the first floor, there were signs of a struggle, an overturned chair, a broken vase, and drops of blood on the carpet. He took her with him, Kitts said grimly. Check the airport, the train station, all roads out of town. An hour later, a message came in. Hugo's yacht had left a private dock in the harbor. Witnesses saw him boarding with a young woman who didn't look quite right. Kitts immediately requested assistance from the Coast Guard and drove to the port. The yacht was heading for the Canadian border less than an hour away by water. A Coast Guard patrol boat caught up with Hugo's yacht in Canadian waters. The operation was carried out in conjunction with the Canadian authorities. Hugo was arrested, and Tallulah was freed. She was alive, but under the influence of a sedative. A suitcase containing money and documents was found in the yacht's cabin, along with a blood-stained knife wrapped in a towel. Forensic examination revealed that it was the murder weapon used to kill Bernice Higgins. 3 days later, Kitts met Tallulah again, this time in the hospital where she had been admitted for examination after the ordeal. How are you feeling? He asked, sitting down next to her bed. Better, she replied quietly. The doctors say I'm physically fine, but the emotional wounds, she smiled weakly. That will take time. Do you remember what happened at Hugo's house? Tallulah nodded. I went to see him after our conversation. I wanted to ask him if he was really my father. He didn't deny it. He said he had always cared for me from afar, that he loved Bernice but couldn't marry her because of his family. And then I asked him about Marcus's death, about the smuggling, the dirty money. He got angry. He said I asked too many questions. He suggested we have a drink and discuss everything calmly. I don't remember what happened next. I woke up on the yacht. Kitts nodded. Tests showed traces of a strong sleeping pill in Tallulah's blood. Everett Hugo confessed to the murders of Bernice Higgins and Decker Williams, Kitts reported, and his involvement in Marcus's death 12 years ago. According to him, Marcus discovered documents about his illegal drug operations, transportation across the Canadian border, and money laundering through a network of beauty salons. And me? What did he say about me? He confirmed that you are his daughter, that Bernice got pregnant by him when he was 25 and she was 18. He was already married, and they decided to give the baby to Bernice's sister. A year later, Bernice met Ronald and married him. Tallulah closed her eyes. All my life, I thought my real mother had died in childbirth, that I was the niece of my rich and successful Aunt Bernice, who took me in out of the kindness of her heart. And it turns out my whole life has been built on a lie. What did you do when you found out the truth from Decker Williams? Tallulah opened her eyes and looked at Kits. At first I didn't believe it. Then I got angry. I wanted to make Bernice confess. The night I arrived at her house, I was furious. I yelled at her and accused her of all kinds of sins. And what did she say? She cried. She said she had always loved me, that she gave me to her sister so I could have a normal life, that she couldn't keep me because Ronald wouldn't accept someone else's child. She begged me to forgive her. And did you forgive her? Tallulah was silent for a long time, staring out the window at the gray sky. I don't know, I was so confused, so many emotions, so much pain. I just left. I said I needed time to think. That was the last time I saw her alive. Kits believed her. Blood tests on the blood found in Hugo's house confirmed that it was Tallulah's. The mark on her temple matched the blow to the edge of the table. All the evidence pointed to Hugo trying to get rid of the only remaining witness to his crimes. What do I do now, Detective? Tallulah asked quietly. My whole family, everyone I loved, turned out to be someone I didn't know. Start over, Kits replied. The truth, no matter how painful, is better than a lie. Now you know who you really are, and you can decide for yourself who you want to be. Tallulah smiled weakly and nodded. Thank you, Detective, for everything. Kits understood that this was only the beginning of a long journey for Tallulah. To find out at 32 that your real mother is the woman you've known all your life as your aunt, and your father is a criminal who killed his own lover. That was too much for anyone to bear. A few days later, Orlando Kits attended Bernice Higgins' funeral. It was a modest ceremony, with only a few people there to see her off. Tallulah stood by the coffin, pale and detached. There were no tears in her eyes, only endless fatigue and sadness. Kits approached her after the ceremony. How are you? I'll survive, Tallulah replied quietly. After all, she was my mother. No matter what our history was, no matter what mistakes she made, part of me will always be connected to her. Kits nodded. In his years on the police force, he had seen his share of tragedies, but this family drama touched him deeply. Human relationships, secrets, lies that build up over the years and eventually lead to tragedy. What are you going to do now? He asked. I'm leaving Port Huron. Too many memories, too much pain. I'm going to start over somewhere else. They stood by the fresh grave as a light rain began to fall. Kits opened his umbrella and held it out to Tallulah. You know, he said, looking at the name Bernice Higgins on the gravestone, sometimes the worst secrets are the ones kept in the family. Blood ties can be both a blessing and a curse. Now I know that, Tallulah replied. Thank you for telling me the truth, Detective, no matter how bitter it is. Kits watched her walk down the cemetery path, her slender figure, her shoulders straight, her head held high. The daughter of Bernice Higgins and Everett Hugo, a woman who had lived a life of lies but had finally discovered the truth about herself. At a high price, but she had found it. The detective glanced at the grave one last time and headed for his car. The case was closed. Truth had prevailed, but for some reason, his heart felt heavy.